Hello and welcome to the gmsmagazine channel. I am Paco Garcia, and in this video I have an interview with some of the people that belong to the union that has recently been created at Paizo. That has taken the world of role-playing games by storm because I don't think anybody expected that this was going to happen, at least not this quickly, and B, even though plenty of people have been saying that things have been happening at Paizo for the last number of years, the truth is that we have been blinded, and I say blinded in a very rhetorical way, by some absolutely fantastic products and some wonderful people who have been so passionate about what they have been producing that everything else has been overlooked. It seems that the situation came to a point where it could no longer remain the same, and some people decided to take action. And that action has led to this union. Whether you think it's a good idea or not, well, it's a matter of debate. I know that unions in the United States don't have the same regard, status, or power that they have in Europe, and yet here we are. So I reckon this is a sign of something else that's going on, and proof that what has been said, it's actually closer to the truth than anybody would have believed. Is this going to have some positive aspects for Paizo? It remains to be seen, but the words from the people that I am interviewing in this video seem to believe it is. I'm not going to rumble any longer. I'm just going to leave you with it, and very much hope that you enjoy it. And please leave your comments in the show notes in the description, because that would be wonderful to hear. Thank you very much indeed for being there, and I hope you enjoy the interview. Dave, Mark, welcome to the show. This is incredibly exciting to have you two here, because basically and literally you are within the first of its kind within the world of role-playing games, which is the creation of a union, in this case within Paizo itself, which is absolutely wonderful. How are you two doing?
I'm doing well.
It's been a long month or two.
I bet.
But with all of this news, I'm doing a lot better than if you had asked me 2 weeks ago.
Good. Well, that's a very good starting point. So, okay, before we go into the ins and outs of what's going on and blah, 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 and loads of questions people in Twitter and Facebook are asking me to ask you, and some of my own, why are you here? I mean, wait a second, who are you? Because, okay, I don't know any of you, I mean, Facebook or anything at all. So I am the ignorant one of the trio. So, Mark, why are you here? What do you do within Paizo?
All right. So I'm Mark Seifter. I'm the design manager at Paizo, and I'm here for UPW, United Paizo Workers. So I am a member of the union. And that's why I'm here. Dave?
I'm Dave Nelson. I'm a frequent freelancer for Paizo, and I was one of the freelancers who was part of the concerted effort to encourage Paizo to voluntarily recognize the union. I am not part of UPW, though I do support them and want them to succeed in everything that they're doing and trust them incredibly. But I'm not legally attached to Paizo in any way other than the contracts that I pick up to do, and my association with them formally ends after I complete them as well, until the next one.
Okay. Mark, how long have you been at Paizo? What's your experience within the company?
I've worked at Paizo for 7.5 years.
Okay.
I came in starting as a designer, and now I'm a design manager, which I still do all the designer stuff that I did before, but I also organize our schedule and other things like that. And now, when it comes to unions, not everyone can join a union in the United States. It turns out that if you are a supervisor of other people by certain legal definitions, you can't. Even if some of the work that you do is on the kind of basic production, Paizo determined that I did not count by like a very edge situation on that. And so therefore I'm part of the union's bargaining group, and I have joined the union, although that was not immediately clear to me when the union was starting, and we hadn't been sure that that's what Paizo would go with, but I'm very happy to be in the union given that I am eligible.
Good. That's very good, because otherwise it would be very difficult to ask you the questions that we have to ask you. So it's good that you are, kind of the voice of the Paizo union. That's absolutely excellent. Okay, let's.
I mean, there's a lot of different people in the Paizo union, and we work together. So I am a voice of the Paizo union, but everyone speaks for our own experiences and for our comrades working together with us in the union.
Okay, now I was kind of joking that because for today, for this podcast and this video, you are kind of the voice of what the union is represents and wants to do. So let's talk a little bit at the beginning. I know very little about what it is to create a union or how much power a union has in the United States, because quite frankly, it's pretty fucked up from that point of view. So I can imagine that getting to the point of deciding we must have a union, there must have been an awful lot of stuff going on at the time. And I'm not particularly interested in all the horrific things that people claim has happened or that have actually indeed happened in the past. But I would like to know, what was it like, the genesis of this union? What led to it?
Okay, so I would say that even as far as several years back, like 3 years ago or more, there were people talking to me about, like maybe we should form a union. It never got to it at that point. And at the point where I became a manager and it wasn't clear whether I qualified or not, like the amount that people talked to me decreased because of some of the legalities in the U.S. Around that. For instance, in the U.S., you're not allowed to support a union as a manager because, there's not a law against it, but it could cause issues with like claims of voting tampering in the union vote. But once it is established, then you can support it, but you can't go against it. Okay. So it's been around for a while, and not to get into any specifics, but the main reason it's been around for a while is that the pay is very low for in just the tabletop RPG industry in general. It's not like Paizo is that much lower than most of the other ones. Only Wizards of the Coast pays a lot more, but it's in an area, the Seattle metro area, that is extremely expensive and is growing at an incredibly rapid rate of cost. And so with the low pay, which right now, like an entry level position, even in the editorial department where I work that makes the books, which is higher than some of the other departments, is slightly below the living wage as calculated by MIT for the area. Slightly below. And living wage is not exactly like a very high amount, and you have to be pretty skilled to even qualify to get an editorial position at Paizo in general. And so add that to crunch, which is an incredibly hard workload. That's common in all of gaming, but in video gaming, it's like we have to meet this specific deadline, so we have this time of like ridiculous crunch for a video game, right? And then it's over, and they may fire the team or whatever happens next. But at Paizo, it's a constant state of crunch. And it's kind of tied to the pay too, because if they had more money, they could hire more people or pay more or both. But the tabletop RPG industry in general doesn't have particularly high margins, isn't a particularly lucrative industry. And the old joke is, how do you make a small fortune in the tabletop RPG industry? You start with a large fortune. And so that is really what, like, just that feeling of being crunched, constantly working. It either means you have to work a bunch of extra hours and it's a salaried position, so you don't get overtime or anything for doing that, you just have to do it, or it means that sometimes you have to do a lot more work in the same number of hours in a way that like burns you out and burns your brain, and maybe leads to a result that's not as good. But even if it does lead to a result that is of high quality, that usually means that like you come out of it feeling like ugh, because you put like twice as much brain power per hour into it as you would normally do. So that's what led to it happening kind of all over time. But then kind of eventually the recent events happened. We lost two of the most respected members of the customer service team. And honestly, I think part of what precipitated into a real action, like a big action and just forming the union, is something that Dave could speak to, because before the union officially stepped out and said, hey, we'd like to be recognized, the freelancers took action first on behalf of us, not themselves. They weren't asking for more money for themselves. They were asking for help for us. So
that is quite incredible, because I mean, Dave, as a freelance, you are in an incredibly precarious position, because once your contract is over, the company could say, enough of this troublemaker, no more.
Right.
So for you to join and make that move, what was it like for you? I mean, what was going through your heads?
So I can speak on a personal level. When everything kind of came out and various accusations were leveled, some credible, some not, a lot of them worried me very greatly. And at a personal level, I felt for the people who have been kind enough to give me work to help me in my career as an author. I've been freelancing for Paizo only since my first project was in early 2019. So I haven't even been working with the company cooperatively very long whatsoever. And Mark is one of the people who I think has helped me a great deal become a better author, and so many others that he works with. And to hear that these were the conditions they needed to work under just absolutely broke my heart. And I started speaking with other freelancers, and we had a big conversation about what can we do, and is it still ethical for us to continue writing for Paizo? Are we feeding in and enabling a system that is doing this to the people that we respect and care about? And we all sort of put our heads together, and the determination that we made mostly as a group was that we would collectively stop working for Paizo and inform Paizo management, and by which I mean the executives, as to why. And we wanted to try and give as much help to the developers and the staff at Paizo as we could, and as much ammunition for them to act in whatever way that they thought was best for the company. Because we're not actually in Paizo itself. We hear things tangentially through word of mouth and everything else, but really the actual employees know best. And we were just trying to give them as much capability to bargain as we possibly could. And then when the United Paizo Workers came out and they said, we're forming a union, every freelancer that was withholding work or saying that they were not going to continue working with Paizo said, we will retract that and start back working with Paizo immediately if the union is voluntarily recognized. And I think that from what I hear, that was a very important step, and I'm glad that we were able to do that.
That was a big deal. It definitely was. So from the end being at Paizo, so first there was the announcement from the freelancers of, I don't feel like it's ethical to necessarily keep working with these conditions. Here's what we want. We're going to be withholding work, even work that's been contracted. And at first, even among the staff, like there was definitely some worry because there was big giant books that we were about to try to contract that we couldn't start contracting. There were some big books that had work that was about to be due that was not going to be handed in. And fortunately, upon hearing that, the executive who's in charge of the editorial team, Eric Mona, said to all the staff members, "This is not on you. Do not worry about it. We will figure it out for that." So it could have been worse, right? Because it could have been like, okay, you have to find a way to work around this. But that helped calm down about half of the initial worry. And the other half of the worry was from staff who were honestly like, when the freelancers are saying it's not ethical, did they feel like we, the staff who brought them on, have like misled them or betrayed them by having them work here? And within a day or two, quickly determined that second one was completely unfounded, because the freelancers, Gen Con was starting and there were live panels. I was actually in the first one with Leo Glass and Michael Sayer. And the freelancers not only showed up to the panels en masse, but were extremely positive and supportive all the time, and came pretty quickly clear that the freelancers loved and supported us, and that is where it had been coming in. We're not feeling like the staff members that had formed a bond with them had done so in a problematic way. And so then, like Dave said, it definitely, once the union was announced, gave the union a lot of additional leverage towards being recognized. And that's because the freelancers, like Dave said, made some requests that were based off of secondhand knowledge. It was still like, more informed information than some other people who made requests, because it was based on a pretty tight connection to some of the other people in the company. But a lot of those requests also will require a lot of time to complete. And there were some very good requests on that list, but they require a lot of time to complete. And so by saying, you know what, though, this is about faith that they will be completed, and by accepting the union, that gives us the faith that we'll start turning the words in now. It was kind of the best of both worlds, because whichever of those things the union also wants to ask for, we can. And we can ask for those things, but the words come in so that we can keep working on the books that would otherwise be delayed and then not come out and make the revenue that would pay the workers. So it actually was very effective. And as far as I could tell, it led to a situation where I thought that at least some of the executives wanted to recognize the union like pretty early on. I mean, they were still like checking with lawyers and getting everything worked out. But as far as I know, having a voluntary recognition by the company that happened in a week after the union was announced is actually very fast and a very positive outcome. Half Price Books, which is a used bookstore in the area right near Paizo, also tried to form a union at about the same time, and now their company is trying to bust the union and has put up like a big sign about like, we are going to force a vote, but first we're going to give you one-on-one meetings where we tell you not to do it and why it's bad and things like that. And that is the other version of what could happen when there's a union, and Paizo chose. And I think that the freelancers definitely helped create pressure towards that, but Paizo chose, no, we're going to voluntarily accept the union and work with the union.
Now, let me be a little bit cynical here for a second, because and I heard this somebody in Twitter about this and say literally, yeah, they did it voluntarily, but it's not like you gave them that much of a choice, because if they hadn't recognized and the freelance had actually walked away, I mean, Paizo would have been in very, very serious trouble.
They probably would. They do have certain actions they could have tried to take at that point, but those actions are generally pretty extreme and would likely generate bad PR because, well, some of it involves persuasion, trying to convince people, no, you don't want a union. Union wouldn't be good for you. It can also involve trying to change the composition of the company so that the vote would not pass. And a lot of those can lead to some, in general, it's just like choices that are not nice
Mm-hmm.
and are not in the spirit of good faith. That like even before the union was recognized, the executives and the upper management has been coming to people in lower management like me or other workers who do work and sometimes do a little bit of management, and been saying we're going to make a good faith effort to fix this. And obviously those things take time, so we haven't seen the results of that yet. But if they started acting in bad faith, that would definitely, I mean, you're right, that would definitely have been bad for them in certain ways. But they did have the option to try to do
Okay.
that, and they didn't. And to some extent, I think there's a lot of different opinions out there, and some people are more hopeful. I try to be more optimistic because I've been a pessimist in my past, and it feels bad. Some people are more pessimistic,
Mhm.
and so even we're like, oh yeah, I bet they won't recognize it. And it at least showed the most pessimistic people that was not what was going to happen. So
Dave, how did it feel like from your point of view, from being a freelance for the company?
I'm so a couple things. First of all, we as a freelancer unit, we didn't get every single freelancer in the room to talk about it, but it was a good portion, and there was a lot of trepidation among freelancers as well, kind of going in the opposite direction of what Mark says that the editorial team felt. We were concerned that our action was going to blow back and hurt the staff,
Mm-hmm.
and we were terrified of that. And we tried our best to confirm that that was not going to be the case, but ultimately we had to take a leap of faith. Also, not every freelancer was in a position where they could have withheld an active contract, and I want to make that very clear. Is a lot of us freelancers do this part-time. We have other sources of income simply because it's just not feasible in the United States with the amount of work and everything we get in order for it to be a full-time job. But some people are dependent on that income and could not halt their active projects. And very early, a determination we made when talking among freelancers was that there was nothing wrong with that and no judgment whatsoever. That whoever could not withhold an active contract or could not stop working for Paizo and lose that income stream, that was what they needed to do, and that they certainly should. So, the Giant Con streams were very helpful for us too, because we saw that we had done the right thing, which up until that point we didn't have any proof of. But now that all of this is resolved, I'm frankly quite happy to make sure that the reins are handed over to Paizo staff and the union, who are in the best position to know what they need. And we also established very clearly that we don't want Paizo to burn. We don't want it to fold up shop. We want it to continue succeeding, and this is how. And we know very much that Paizo workers are not going to make ridiculous demands and run the entire company into the ground. That's honestly silly, because then they lose their paycheck. They know what they can and cannot do, and they're going to act accordingly, because at the end of the day, we trust these people, and that's why we did what we did in the first place.
That is something that I would like to talk about. What is it that you want to achieve? But before going into that, I'm interested in finding out how easy or difficult has it been to actually create the union. Mark, I know you told me that this has been going on and been spoken about for a number of years, but it has happened actually very, very quickly.
Yeah.
For people out there, and I bet that plenty are going to be watching you like hawks to see how these develop, people who would be interested and say, maybe we should do this in the company. What has the process of creating the union been like?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about like the very, very early steps that were formed by a few people, I was not one of those people, so I don't know exactly what all of those first steps were.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel like you can always you can always go on to unitedpaizoworkers.org to find out more about the union, or talk on Twitter to @Paizo Workers, or just try to get in contact with me, and I can get you in contact with some of the people who did start things out without naming names of who they are. If you wanted to start up your own union and you were looking in for that very nitty gritty details, but just for viewers who are like, so what has to go on with this? The way unions are organized in the U.S., you generally have a larger union that backs you up, but the union is made up of the actual people. So the union is not some faceless entity out there. Like Dave said, it's the Paizo staff. We love these products. That's part of why we've been willing to accept like pay that is not really great to work on something we love, although we still want to have pay that can actually pay us to live, and to be able to like get a home and maybe have a retirement someday, or a family. But when it comes to it, you have to have a larger union that sort of, you're a member of that union. And I imagine that a main benefit of that is that everyone pays dues, and the dues can be used to like help you make it through a strike, for example, if that happens. No one at UPW wants a strike to happen. I mean, we just want to negotiate and want to make things better for everyone. And we're not currently calling for a boycott or any kind of actions like that, but you pay dues so that you can get services such as going through a strike. And I imagine being part of a larger union means that like, if your group is new and doesn't have as much of cash right now, and you need to strike, or your group has needed to strike longer than expected, then you can call on support from the other unions, and then when they are in need, then you support them, things like that. You also join what's called a local, which is a chapter of the larger union. In Paizo's, UPW's case, the Communications Workers Union is the unit we joined, CWA, and we're looking for a local. So it goes sort of the big top union, then the local, which is kind of like a group of local union working together, and then the separate union. So you have to get in touch with those people who also, by the way, once you found your umbrella union, they really know about forming unions and can get you a lot of information. I know that they were a great resource to the people who were in there from the very beginning and getting things set up. You're going to need to be able to get people to sign union cards to confirm the union. And it might be forced to a vote if the company doesn't voluntarily recognize the union. In our case, that didn't happen. So people signed union cards, agreed to join the union. After voluntary recognition or a successful vote, that's what happened for us. So we're moving into that phase. The next step for your union is going to be to do some bargaining. Like, you don't form a union just to have it and do nothing. It's all about just being able to have a voice that is a lot of people together, and so that upper management will listen to it. Because when one person goes to upper management with an opinion, they're not going to necessarily listen. And to be honest, like, I think my opinion is very well informed, but if I had an opinion and like 5 upper management people all were like, that's wrong in this situation based on our combined however many years of experience, like, I can see why they wouldn't necessarily listen to me, even if I think it's the right thing. But if all of the workers together are saying something, it is a stronger voice. It's more persuasive, even if it doesn't come with any kind of like any kind of carrot or stake attached. And it's just like, listen, this is what we all think. And so that's sort of one of the benefits and the powers of forming the union. So the next step after recognition is to find negotiators and to figure out basically going back and forth trying to make a deal between the union and company. And in US union law, that can keep going until either a deal is reached, or at some point, if the company can declare it to be stalled, at which point they revert back to the most recent offer. At that point, the union can say, hey, that most recent offer, either like fine, or they can say, no, that wasn't in good faith, that wasn't something we could agree to, and then go to a strike. that is the most extreme outcome that can happen if you kind of are at loggerheads for the negotiation. But ultimately, it just comes down to talking to each other, working together, and hopefully coming up with a great solution that, well, it's a compromise. So, they always say compromises are where everyone's not quite happy with the outcome. But sometimes you can have a compromise where everyone is pretty happy with it. And those can be situations like Paizo's, where one of the problems, other than the ones I told you already about workload and pay, is kind of like communication and transparency are weak. So just even forming the union to strengthen communication and transparency, we might be able to find solutions that people are generally happy with just by talking and having the conversation.
Dave, from your point of view, what is it? I mean, firstly, are you as a freelance going to be able to join the union?
No, I will not.
Okay.
There's some discussion in multiple freelance circles about, what this means for us, and are we going to be investigating any of that? There's already some thought, but we're not. Excuse me, cat. But we're not looking seriously at it right now. We're happy to be returning to work, and we want to give United Paizo Workers their due and their much-deserved moment in the sun. And, as Mark has said, unionizing and everything else takes time, particularly when you think about freelancers. We're significantly more scattered. There's a whole bunch more of us. If we end up doing something, I don't think it would be for Paizo exclusive freelancers either. I think it would be something across almost the entire RPG industry, which is a monumental task that is not going to happen overnight, and even almost definitely not within this next calendar year. It's going to be a long time, and I personally think that it's going to be a much, much bigger task than what was achieved here.
And I want to add to that, just like the fact that the freelancers are not protected by the union, and the union offers protections. Washington State, where Paizo is located, has the ability to fire someone at will. And since if you can just fire someone for no reason at will, of course most companies do, because if you give someone a reason, right, they can argue that reason or even go to court on a reason. If you don't give someone a reason, they don't have
anything to argue,
because you're just like, I did it at will. So you can't fire a union employee at will, which is a major protection. The freelancers don't have that protection and are not receiving any direct benefits. And this is just like to reinforce like the courage and just general selflessness of these freelancers, because this was absolutely done on our behalf and with no protections being offered to them against any kind of thing that could happen after that. And so that's part of the reason we were deeply grateful for their courage here.
The biggest question I've been asked in this whole thing is, why would you do this if you're not getting anything out of it?
Yes, I was.
And every time I throw my hands up and I say, because it's the right thing to do, because I care about these people as colleagues, as individuals, as human beings. And at a personal level, I don't see how I could have done anything else and been able to sleep at night. And that was all it was to me. Writing is very important to me. I love contributing to Paizo. It's been something that I have wanted to do for a long time, and I put a lot of work into getting good enough to do so. And I got a tattoo to celebrate my first Paizo assignment. It's incredibly important to me, but if I would trade it all away for making a stand for something that's right. And I was prepared to do that, and I'm very glad that I didn't need to kill my entire career in order to do it, but it was something that I would have done without a second regret.
Oh, but the thing is, even if you are not directly protected by the union as a freelance, the fact is that if the union can give a better working condition for the person who is meant to be assigning the work to the freelance, then you're likely to, at the very least, have better working conditions, if not even a better pay, because the whole thing is safer. So
Yeah.
it's kind of in everybody's
I mean,
interest.
for a writer, it's more of a knock-on effect because freelancers are at their home writing, and if we're successful at the union, then so will we be at Paizo, because we are hoping for an indefinite continuation of working from home for positions other than like warehouse ones that obviously can't be working from home. And in some cases, I mean, like, you could say, well, if the union is asking for more pay for staff, maybe there's like a limited pot in total. But I think that that's just part of the bond between the freelancers and workers, because we've been pushing to raise freelance rates for a while, and freelance rates in the industry in general are not good. But Paizo does now, especially with a few raises that we've been able to get the company to give to freelancers. And it's not completely selfless for everyone, since not being paid enough by Paizo means many Paizo editorial staff and non-editorial staff work for Paizo as freelancers as a second job to help make ends meet over additional hours. So any raises to the upper rate also go to us, but we've also been trying to raise the lower rate. It's really actually close to Wizards of the Coast freelance rates. And in fact, our top paid freelancers are paid as much as like around the low range for Wizards of the Coast, which, given that Wizards of the Coast salaries are about double for the people working there,
that's pretty good.
Maybe a little under double. Our freelancers are relatively paid better. Now, that doesn't mean that our freelancers are paid enough, because writers are in the industry are generally not. But it does mean that you actually make more money freelancing for Paizo per hour by a pretty substantial amount, even if you took into account like insurance and other employee benefits. Obviously, it's not a safer career, because as Dave can attest, I'm sure you can't get an entire year's worth of 40-hour works weeks of freelance at a reliable pace and rate.
As much as I've been trying to convince you to give me that amount of work since my first assignment, no, that is not a reliable thing you can chase.
Right.
Okay, fair enough indeed. I have a lot of questions from people who are asking me things in Twitter and on Facebook. And I have Callum from the Released podcast saying, what are the main advice lessons that you would have for employees of all the companies to follow your example?
Well, I think that we have a very special situation that they might not be able to follow exactly the roadmap that Paizo took. I'm glad that we've blazed this trail, because the tabletop RPG industry has and even some video game companies, right, have stirred and tried to form unions and never really have made it up until this point. I know Cards Against Humanity did in terms of the the board game and card game companies, but we had a very special situation where we had a precipitating event where we lost two very well-loved and well-respected members of the customer service team, who a lot of people in the community knew, and the freelancers. Even before the union spoke out to announce ourselves, the freelancers were there already putting pressure on the company. Plus, we, in the end, even with all those things, the executive team could have said no. So we had an executive team that eventually said yes voluntarily. So some other companies are not going to be able to have all of those factors. Another one is that we have people who have very high levels of expertise that are necessary to get the crunch to happen. And the company knows that if people like me left, that they might need to replace those people with multiple new people to get things done. That being said, I would say that special circumstances aside, friendship and camaraderie between people who don't necessarily have only monetary and financial interest to do so were very key in this case. The freelancers and the workers, but also the workers across departments, right? Because Paizo could have tried to have separate unions that were for, this is the union with customer service that joins a more customer service focused union, and here's the union for the editorial staff that joins a more editorial union, and could have gone on it separately and been like, well, each group wants to have each of their own things, because there are some differences in expectations, in what kind of people can take some of the jobs, but we all had a big shared experience, and we really care about each other, even across departments and across teams at Paizo. And it's something that has been building and grown stronger over the time that I've been at the company as well. Because there were, if for people out there who work in companies, I think a lot of people know there's usually some teams that are like fiefdoms and they do their own thing, and they may be trying to be like, no, this isn't our team's fault, it's that other team's fault that we work with. But and I'm not going to say Paizo has always been immune to that, and even when I started there was a lot more of that, but teams have really been coming together and recognizing the shared experience, and that there are many shared things that we all want, and that made UPW and the union way more powerful than it would have been if it was fractured or split, where people were holding on to like rancor and like, oh no, this is more about our team. So I would say that you're more likely to be successful if you build those connections across teams and departments, and that they pre-exist before the union, and you just have friendships that are throughout the company, because that can help with the idea of, yes, I know that like theoretically you could have, like I said, you could have the tech team split off, right? Because tech is something that has a known value, and it's usually pretty high. And be like, look, we are paid less than other tech people are. We're going to do this for us, and who cares about the other teams? But that's not what they did. The tech team and customer service and editorial and everyone are together saying, let's raise us all. So if you can do that in your company, I think that's going to give you a leg up. It's not going to guarantee success for the reasons I said, but it's going to show that it's about what's right, like Dave said, and it's not just about looking out for, just yourself and the people who are working closest to you.
As you mentioned, there are some teams that have actually come together, which means that the union is going to have some goals that are going to benefit all the teams, even though you may have some goals specific for each team. What are the main goals that you have set up for the union in a short term? What's the priority of goals that you want to achieve?
Three main goals.
Okay.
Goal one is for better pay across the company, and that's got to include salary increases to match the cost of living here. Second, and in a way that might help with number one, if people is securing a permanent remote work options for any positions that can, which is pretty much most of them other than the warehouse, and probably the tech team who have to go to servers and other computers that are actually there. So that's helpful not only because work from home removes commutes and is working very efficiently for Paizo, but it could ultimately, and I know there's some serious weird tax laws in Washington that try to discourage this by a lot, lead to people being able to move somewhere much cheaper than this area and still work for Paizo. Because part of the problem is that same salary that is under a living wage here, you could easily own a home in a variety of other places if you were there and not in this area. So that second one helps with the first one. And then the third is greater transparency about the company's finances and long-term plans. And in the past, the company has actually been, in some ways, actually very transparent compared to like the minimum expectation, and having meetings that reveal like a bunch of different information. But they haven't done that in years, and they keep putting it off and not really talking about anything for quite a long time, which definitely leads to concern. And when it comes to decision making and planning, there's always been a pretty decent lack of transparency. Like you could generally get a meeting with a decision maker without too much trouble and make your voice known, but then after that, like you don't know what's going to happen. It probably won't, and you won't know whether that's because they forgot, or they talked about it and someone else said no, or they just didn't agree with you and didn't say it then, or what have you. It just kind of, you have the meeting and who knows, or a decision happens and you're surprised like when we lost those two customer service members, Sarah Marie and Diego, like nobody in the company pretty much knew that was going to happen. The people who found out first were the ones who had a social media connection to the people who were gone, and were like, "Oh yeah, I saw that on Twitter," right? So that lack of transparency is something that is probably one of the easiest things to remedy, because those other two things, they cost money and involve logistics, but will just make such a big difference, because there's sometimes probably things that, oh, there is an explanation for this and it wasn't bad, but they maybe seem bad because you get them with no explanation. Obviously not losing two people, but some smaller things maybe that that rankle. But it's like, oh, if we knew what the reason was and we had communication ahead of time, we could have explained why this was a problem, or even just known it in advance and not been blindsided by it.
Dave, what about you? What would you like the union to actually help you as a freelance, or the rest of the freelance, if you have spoken about this collectively?
Yeah. So collectively, we haven't really spoken about it because our focus has been attempting to help them. We have our own thoughts and opinions based on what we have of second, third-hand knowledge, but ultimately, we've really kind of... There's some stuff we're hoping for that we don't think we can affect outside, that we're hoping that the union would be able to push. All three of the things that Mark stated, I think, are great initiatives. One of the first things that, as I understand it, happens when unions enter negotiations with the company is they get to look at the company's books. So that's going to help a whole lot with the transparency. I think on a personal level, one of the things that would help me is that the more time that if crunch gets alleviated and staff has more time to look over freelancer turn-ins, they have more time to provide feedback, which for someone who's very nervous in nature, like myself, it's incredibly helpful to have detailed feedback on things, because a lot of the time as a freelancer, I will submit a piece and I won't know what got changed, what got cut, what got rewritten at all until the book is in stores and I read it myself. And that can be anxiety inducing for sure. And so giving more relaxed time within the schedule of the staff in order to communicate those things, which I know they've wanted to do for some time, but it just hasn't been feasible because of their product schedule and all of the crunch. On a personal level, that would be wonderful for me. I can't speak for the rest of the freelancers, but I know quite a few of them feel the same. And it's a little thing, but it's another thing of evidence of how the safety and security of staff trickles down to us in various ways. We like working for people who like doing their job. And if we're interacting with people who are happy, odds are they'll interact with us in a positive way, and that makes our work that much better as well.
And Dave, you say it's a little thing, but I can't emphasize enough how important that is, because it's actually an endemic of a problem with crunch, which is that not freelancer feedback is one of the top on our list of this, but a lot of things like that are tasks that if you were playing a real-time strategy game or kind of like upgrading your town hall so it gives you more gold or resources, that anyone who was actually trying to play a game or build an engine would do, but that we've never had the resources to do, that will pay off dividends and just make things better in the long run for everybody, not even just the freelancers. And I don't care if Dave is the only freelancer who thinks that that he wants this more, although I'm sure many others do. All of the freelancers could use it because it's professional development that is being provided in a mutually beneficial way, because the freelancers gain knowledge and skill from people who are experts on even some very fine-grained details that they now will learn. And we gain the ability to have that same freelancer, assuming that, like many of our top freelancers, and like Dave, that they're going to analyze it carefully and apply it in the next work. that it's going to be easier and take us less time later on, right? So it's like buying those upgrades in games that are just like you build all other things 10% faster or something like that in the future. But it's like being in a situation where the enemy is rushing you or something, and you can't afford to buy those quality of life upgrades. And as we all know, as gamers, that can be a frustrating situation. But it's also really good once you can, because you go from being on the brink to like really improving things for everyone, and you'll have freelancers who are stronger and more professional and more able to I mean, maybe not more professional is the wrong word for it, but that are like more in the know about some of the details of how to do things just the way we like it. And you're going to have tools and design guides that can be updated more that you can't really do in Crunch. And it just winds up being even better for the company in small ways. Like if you lose a major staff member, there'll be documentation that can help you train the next staff member. Or they can be a freelancer who already learned from that person before that person left because there was more time for feedback.
What kind of pushback, and this is a question that my friend Mark Carroll is asking me, what kind of pushback did you get from management? I know that the management has recognized the union voluntarily, but I can imagine there must have been an initial reaction to start with. What kind of pushback did you get from them?
So I didn't see pushback. And again, I wasn't there in the first few days because I thought I was ineligible, but I also watched all the reactions anyway. I was in support. I couldn't openly say that because if it did come to a vote, then that could be considered vote tampering. But I watched as hashtag unionized Paizo rose to number 5 on all of Twitter for a few minutes. Just after Steve Bannon refusing to testify, people being angry at Biden, and 2 things about baseball, and above an NFL number being retired, Batman, George Takei, and National Dessert Day. So I watched that, and I watched reactions, and even as early as some of the very first few days, I saw like executives favoriting posts on Twitter from the union, for example, and or other things like that. That seemed like, I mean, it wasn't an open statement of support and yes, you should do the union, but there were in threads connected to the union, and I saw generally what gave me the sense that they were that the ones that I was most in contact with, at least, I felt like they wanted to say yes, and that thought it would be a great deal to have a union in exchange for not having a freelancer work action of withholding the work. And so there actually wasn't really much in the way of, as you call it, pushback in terms of those reactions. I would say even the early signs to me, and they were vague and they were not direct, and no one directly said this, but to me it felt like it was more of a, we don't know about unions. We've never been managers dealing with unions. We need to talk to our lawyers and figure this out thing. That's the vibe I got, rather than a vibe of pushing back against the union.
That's very interesting, because it very much contrasts with the experience that you were talking to me about earlier regarding this half-price bookstore that. Yes. They've got a massive pushback.
Yeah, and honestly, the half-price books scenario is, I was afraid it was going to go in that direction, and a lot of us were prepared to continue withholding work, and we were digging in for the long haul. The fact that it only took Paizo a week to finish consulting their lawyers is amazing to me, because law is so complicated in the U.S. But this was huge, and the organizing that the Paizo Workers did, I think, has a lot to do with it too, because by the time they announced their intent to unionize, they already had a supermajority, and it was almost a foregone conclusion that if it got pushed to a vote without excessive action of things that Mark was saying earlier, there was almost no way that the vote was not going to go through. So the option was Paizo could recognize the union anyway, or it could spend a lot of money that it probably doesn't have, because, again, profit margins are very thin in this industry, on anti-union lawyers and anti-union consultants and tactics, which would be silly. And I certainly hoped they would make not only the moral decision, but the tactical decision. And from a very cynical point of view, I think Paizo can do great things in a marketing push by saying, we are the only unionized tabletop RPG company in the United States.
I agree. I think it's a good opportunity.
It can be cynical, but I also like to look at it this way, which is, yes, maybe they didn't have that much of a choice without doing something extreme, but ultimately they made the good choice. And my opinion is that we might as well recognize and give a thumbs up for doing a good thing, even if it was in a situation where there wasn't that much of an option. And we might as well give a thumbs down and shake our heads when people do a bad thing. Because if we don't give any credit for the time that it is a good thing, then it gets harder for people to see that we're looking to build something positive and we're looking to work together.
Well, the other thing is to be completely fair, and I have absolutely no, nothing, no axe to grind or anything at all. In fact, I have supported Paizo for years and years and years and years and years. But the fact is that if we've got for us as customers over the last few years that Paizo's always tried to do the right thing. Paizo's always been pretty good at inclusion, diversity, representation within games and adventures and everything. So that impression of Paizo wants to do the right thing, it still transpires by what you're commenting, Mark, regarding the management deciding, okay, you know what, yeah, we'll go for this. I'm sure they consider the ramifications and the possibilities of pushing back and trying to stop it. But as you say, eventually they decided, and pretty quickly, let's go for it. Either because they had nothing to, no way to oppose this, or because they thought, yeah, whatever, they are right. Let's go for this. Okay, Ralph Mühlberger is asking me, what would you like to see from companies working with Paizo in terms of support for the union and you as the workers?
That's an interesting question. So you're talking about partners,
yep.
Paizo's licensed partners. So I know that as of right now, when it comes to like officially doing United Paizo Workers stuff, like this merch, that's from unitedpaizoworkers.org. You can buy it there to support the union. All of those things are done through the union, not through Paizo and Paizo's partners. So, obviously, like a statement of saying like we support United Paizo Workers, that's something that anyone can do and that makes us happy to do that. But when it comes to monetizing or things like that, at this time, that is not something that the union is looking for.
Mm-hmm.
That said, again, I speak for myself and I'm a member of the union, but I know that there are people who are always figuring things out and things can change. But it's a fairly up-to-date information I received from someone else in the union that, in terms of right now, partners will not, for instance, be using this logo to advertise themselves, and will not be doing things like selling union merchandise. And the ones who leverage the union and logo are the union ourselves.
That's not a bad point, actually. I was wondering more if I know that Ralph is asking because he runs a company called Ardent Roleplaying. I don't know if you've heard of it, but they do augmented reality, absolutely incredible stuff. So he's the kind of company that works for Chaosium and creates 3D environments that people can use remotely or locally. So I wonder if what he means is, for a company like Ardent pairs with other companies and matches, what can they do? What could a company like his, or a company who works for you in terms of, I don't know, supplying paper for the books. I'm just saying something off the top of my head because it's midnight and my brain is smashed. That kind of thing. What kind of support as a company would you like to see that people who work for you would give you, that would signal, yeah, we like working like this better?
Okay. So what kind of support would they give other than a statement of support?
Yeah.
So I don't actually know what is allowed and what the policy is on that. But if there is anyone who wants to try to figure that out, you can get in touch with me or anyone else that you know to be in the union. I'm not we're not giving out names of people in the union right now. I think it's actually more okay now that the union has been recognized, but it had been an earlier policy before the union was recognized not to do it, and we haven't like officially rescinded that yet. But I can try to get in touch with more people in the union and figure out more details in that. But as far as I know right now, it's more of a like speak out about your support and make it clear, and less of a here are some concrete like product related things that you can do.
Okay, that's pretty good. I'm going to suggest something not just to Rolf but to everybody, and is that take a look at the list of people within the company and within the freelancers who supported this and give them work. I think that would be a good way of saying,
absolutely.
Of seeing something happening.
If you want to help creators, you have to go to those creators. I didn't answer that because I was thinking about things in terms of what can a partner company do rather than what can an individual do. But I actually made a Twitter thread at Mark Seifter, it's just my first name and last name, that was actually just during the beginning of all of this, around the time of the freelancer concerted work action, where I talked about all the groups of people at Paizo, named everyone, and talked about the freelancers too. And after each group, I put like here's an exercise of something you can do if you have the mental spoons and bandwidth to do it, if you want to support those people. And for freelancers, exactly what you said. I said, look through your favorite books, see if there's the name of a freelancer who's often in there a lot, or check blogs that indicate what each freelancer wrote. Find out who you really like, and then look for more things by that author, or check if they have a Patreon and things like that. That is a very good thing that an individual can do in terms of freelancers. I have a list of that for like every team at Paizo on a way overly long Twitter thread.
Fair enough. Okay, and my friend Beth Rimmel is saying, what do you recommend the general public do to signal to Paizo our ongoing support of the union? You've obviously mentioned about the t-shirt, but for people like myself, for instance, who are living in Spain, and I'm not going to get a chance to getting a t-shirt, unfortunately, or a mug or anything, what can the general public do to, to voice the support for you?
So first, I think that the t-shirts, somebody who was ordering it in Europe said that it is actually cheaper there because one of the places that was sending it was in Europe. So you might be able to. So you should check.
I will.
They said it was funny because their Paizo Workers shirt had a lower shipping fee to them than buying something from Paizo because of where it was made. You should check it out. I'm not sure that's true in Spain or not, because I think they were in a different country in the EU, the person who said that. But that's an aside, though. Just in general, if you want to signal to management that you're in support of Paizo Workers, I would say that there are a few things that you can do there. You can send them an email or a message just saying, I'd like to tell you that I'm in support of United Paizo Workers. You could even do that while talking about something concrete that you were doing. You could say, for example, like, I've been following Paizo and I've been a fan of some of your products, but now I have started a subscription of Paizo rulebooks, and it's because I'm in support of United Paizo Workers. Certainly the opposite, which was people who canceled their subscriptions and described that the reason why they did that, is something that can be noticed as a metric. But that was like when we lost the customer service members. That's something that can be noticed, and that could have an effect. as workers, we prefer it if, in general, if people are buying the products that are used to pay us, but that also you can say, like, this is why I did it. It's like, I support the union. I support the fact that you have voluntarily recognized the union, and I've subscribed, but my subscription is contingent on that. So I think that could be a kind of message. It doesn't have to be a subscription, right? It could just be something else, or you're like, I've started a campaign in Pathfinder 2nd edition or in Starfinder, or started a live stream if someone likes doing live streams, or just anything like that. Just reach out and tell the executives that that's what you've been doing. And pretty much all of them, their email is their first name dot last name at paizo.com. Right? So
Okay.
you can reach them pretty easily by going and talk to them and send that and send something positive, and that'll show that there's a lot of people who are feeling positive now about all of this. And I think it's always good to send positive messages, because it's very easy to send negative messages. Like, our brains are wired to want to speak out when something's gone wrong that we don't like, because we want to get it changed. But it's not easy to send positive messages. As creators, we need praise of our work. So, like, also, in general, to go back to your other question of what you can do, you can write reviews and give praise of work. It's one of the things I mentioned on my thread. See, freelancers would love it. But when it comes to even the executives too, right? Like, there are a lot of bad things that happen, and I'm not saying that there weren't people at Paizo who were responsible for it too. I'm not saying that there shouldn't have been negative feedback. There should. But after they got negative feedback, getting positive feedback is gonna feel good, right? In their inbox, being like, I am very supportive of the United Paizo Workers. I'm happy you have voluntarily recognized them, and I'm doing this good thing. I'm subscribing. I'm gonna check out this new game. I'm buying these new books. That's like a little light that can be in their day, and that reminds them that the union is why.
Dave, I have a question for you. What are going to be the things that you would see that would make you feel, yeah, this has been truly worth it?
I already feel that it's been truly worth it. When we first did our concerted action, we did not have any assurances or any knowledge that Paizo Union was in the works. So hearing that announcement alone made us feel like this had already been worth it, especially when it became clear that part of the reason workers felt that they were in the position to do so was because of our work stoppage. Seeing it recognized is a huge step as well. Seeing a final contract that everybody is happy with would be really kind of what seals the deal. And to know that management continues to work in good faith and negotiate in good faith. Because it's easy enough to recognize a union and then not interact with it appropriately and find ways to destroy it that way. I see that actually in my day job. But I personally am on the lookout for how negotiations go, and I know that they can take quite some time, again, from my day job experience. But if anything bad faith does end up occurring, I, on a personal level, am ready to use the one power that I have and stop work again. And it's, aside from drumming up voices on social media, those are really the only two powers that I have outside of the company itself. But they're tools that I'm willing to use. So I really hope it doesn't come to that, and I don't think it will. But I do not feel that this is 100% done until there is a contract inked and signed and enforced.
Fair enough, indeed. I have just to start wrapping up the interview a little bit. I have a pretty important question. We haven't talked about the people who have criticized the union creation. Let's face it, specifically in the US, there is an awful lot of anti-union feeling, and even though the majority of people have been very supportive, there has been some people who have gone into the doom and gloom of, oh my god, the unions are going to destroy Paizo, which is like, kind of not the point of a union at all. It's quite ridiculous. But
No.
I can imagine those people very ready to say, if the company goes bust, it's going to be your fault that the union went. What would you have to say to those people?
Well, I mean, I understand why there are people like that. For one thing, that there's definitely a lot of spin and PR on every side in this company, and there's certainly a lot of corporate anti-union PR out there. For another, I've talked to people who just legitimately had a bad experience with unions because unions are made up of people, and people are complicated, and some people make bad decisions, and some unions make bad decisions, right? Because they're made up of people. But Paizo, UPW, United Paizo Workers, is made up of Paizo staff who are passionate about what we do, and we are passionate about each other, and in many cases are extremely talented in our fields, and have to make pretty tricky logistical decisions. Not these exact decisions that the union is going to make, but in other transferable skills and ways on a basis throughout our job. So I would say that trust that the union is made up of people who care and who want to see Paizo succeed. And it's not like that when like Dave said, right? A company has to open the books to a union to some extent. So if the company opens the books and it's like, okay, we have X amount of money that's even available, the union is not going to say, well, we want 20 times that much that is given to additional raises for everybody from the union or something like that, right? The union is made up of reasonable people who want Paizo to succeed, who want to continue putting out great products, and just want to do that while living a life and building to have a future. It's like I said at one time before the union myself when I was asked about this, and it's like, someone said to me, was like, what is your goal though, Mark? What are you actually getting at this? When I was talking about these problems with pay, and I said, my goal is not to leave Paizo. My goal is to be able to stay at Paizo and have a future. Because for a lot of time when I had started at the company, every year when it came to the end of the year, I was like, I knew my starting pay was bad, but I thought it was going to come with a lot of raises, and that's how it was going to work out. And that is not how it worked out. I got 0 raises several years. And so every year I was like, I'm going to have to, I don't know what I'm going to do. I should be getting more than this. And then eventually I kind of got ground down to the point where I'd seen some of the finances. I was like, okay, Paizo, I guess Paizo doesn't have enough money to do this. So I have to accept the fact that the first step one towards have a future is leave Paizo. And so I just want to be in the world where that is not step one towards having the future, that you don't have to start by leave Paizo and get another job, but that you can stay at Paizo and have a future.
Fair enough.
That's what people in the union want. We don't want to destroy Paizo. We don't want to do negative things. We want to bring about positive change. And so if there is something that happens later that seems negative, it might be for a lot of other factors as well. There is a global shipping crisis, right?
Paper
I'm
supply.
sure people who are, and that's affected board games as well as tabletop RPGs. It's huge.
Yes.
Containers are costing way more now, and that's going to increase prices in a lot of things across the country. I am sure it will. I'm sure that some people who don't like unions are going to be like, well, this is. Everything that happened is based on the unions, even if the global shipping prices caused some of it too, right? And you're right. But I hope that anyone who is watching this, even if you don't like unions, understands that UPW is trying to make things better, is trying to understand those other factors and to take them into account when making requests in a way that will help the company. Because if you have workers who have good mental health and are not being burned out, and who are having time to train up freelancers and do things that increase productivity, actually can help the company in the long term.
And that is something that I wanted to ask you about. Let's assume that, the union works, that you reach a good agreement for everyone and all workers are happier and all freelancers are better paid and safer in their commissions. What is the company going to be like then? What are we going to see that will make us see that the company is doing better because of what the union is doing?
That's an interesting question, because a lot of the fact of the matter is that a lot of the not being burned out, having better mental health and doing better financially is something that's kind of invisible to customers, right? I mean, because even when things are really not doing well, it's not a typical thing that you're gonna, like, even if you have a convention or another place where you can meet the creators, their creators are not gonna go to a panel and be like, oh, my mental health is shot, I'm totally burned out, I'm so unhappy, and our pay is bad, as the thing, like, in a panel to talk to fans about the latest cool new releases. It's going to be about talking about how excited we are about that release, which we are legitimately excited about, even if all those other things that I just said are true. And so you see the sort of, it's just like with a lot of people, you always see the facade of things are going all right. You asked at the very beginning of the entire interview, your first question was like, how are things going? And I said, they're doing well. And then Dave was like a little more honest and into it, and was saying, yeah, it could have been better, but it's getting better. But it's just sort of culturally conditioned that we don't reveal things when they're negative out to other people. So I think it's going to be hard to tell. Okay. But that I think that the union plays a part in that transparency, because the union has a blog on UnitedPaizoWorkers.org. We're going to be able to put out a blog saying, like, hey, thanks to all of you and our efforts, things are going better, and union workers have maybe we put out a poll or something like that internally in the union, and union workers think that things are going better by X amount based on that. I don't know if there's going to actually be a poll. I'm making that up. But the point is, it is possible to send a blog or some kind of information indicating a thumbs up, whereas before, without a union, it's not really easy to do that, because you just have to have one person who speaks out on social media and it's like, I'm feeling better now. Things were really bad before.
Dave, what about you? What do you think will be the visible signs that when the union is working, that the company is doing better and the things are improving and the company is evolving?
Well, Mark's right. It's not going to be very visible. I think the visible sign that you'll see that the union is working is that a contract has been agreed upon, and that the company still exists, and that none of the workers are going on strike or calling for additional action. That's as easy as it is. That's exactly what a good union is supposed to look like to an outside person, is no signs of exterior strife, but it doesn't have to prove that it's working beyond that in any way. And as Mark said, from the outside, it's difficult to see what's going on. That's part of why so many of us, myself included, were shocked to hear some of the things that came out, because we had an inkling, but we didn't know how bad it truly was, and how much it was weighing on everybody. And so I don't think there's going to be much of a visible sign. Lack of smoke is about all I can really say.
Well, I'm going to predict something here, because I am very good at predicting this sort of shit. I'm actually going to predict the company will be able to do well enough to be able to come out with even more product and branch out a little bit more, because I reckon that one of the signs of health in a company, especially in an editorial company, is the fact that they can take risks and bring out new products that right now, because of the crunch, because of the lack of people, because of the lack of resources, they may not be able to look at and say, oh, okay, we can do this. Maybe we can start something like that. So I am going to say that...
You might be right.
I reckon that is going to be one of the signs that we say, yeah, Paizo's doing well. They're coming up with something new, with something different.
Your prediction has a chicken and egg bit about it that I actually really like, which is that, first of all, just like you said, if you're in a more stable place, you can try something different. But second of all, trying something different and succeeding is going to be necessary to make the situation better in terms of cash flow. It's, to be honest, something that people have been trying to say for a while, and companies, not to say like that the company has done something terribly wrong by saying no to this, because like you said, it's a risk. Companies in general default to being like to the status quo, because the status quo keeps things as they are, and until they're convinced that the status quo is unacceptable, they're usually fine with the status quo as an entity, as a company together, right? And so there have been people, and as you might expect, being on the design team, designers among them, who are pushing for, we need to try something new. We need to try and take a risk. We need to do something else, because if what you have is tabletop RPG, even if you have two, right, they have additions, and those additions have very known cycles that happen. And those cycles have some very positive times, but there are times in those cycles that are not good for the company. And if that's what you do, then you're going to have times that are even worse than what it is like now, because we're not in a bad part of the cycle for the company. So I think you're right that you might see that, but also it might be chicken and the egg. It might be because you saw that, then they were able to get things into a better shape, or it could be because they got things into a better shape, then you could see that.
Well, either way, I think that would be very positive, and I hope that we see that for everyone, really. Guys, thank you so much. Congratulations on the union. Dave, congratulations on the effort that you and the other freelancers have done, because that, I'm going to echo what Mark said, that is incredibly brave, and if that speaks incredibly highly of all of you. So thank you very, very much indeed for doing that. And I hope that what my friend Lee Patterson is saying, that we're hearing of a possible freelance union forming throughout the industry, I hope it becomes true if this works.
I think it'll take some time again, but it's certainly a possibility. And I think that I really do hope that we come to a point where everyone in the U.S. can be unionized, because it honestly just assists workers as best it can. And as Mark said, unionization is a tool. It depends on the people wielding it. But certainly in the case of Paizo, if we didn't trust them to do the right thing, we wouldn't be working for them in the first place.
Fair enough indeed. Good luck. I hope it goes incredibly well, and we can get back together at some point in the next few months and talk about all the cool things that you're all achieving within Union and within the company.
I hope so too.